National Nutrition Events, the natural health experts, the latest natural health info. Known in health food stores around the world as an advocate for the importance of omega-3, dietitian Karlene Karst is a natural health educator, media personality, and formulator of the Sealicious brand of omega-3 supplements. Serving on the editorial board of Canada's Alive magazine, she reaches over 500,000 Canadians every month through her columns. Get the goods on healthy fats in Karlene's latest book, The Full Fat Solution. Karlene is a mother of 2 healthy boys. She's also a National Nutrition seminar speaker. Omega-3 and the Full Fat Solution with Registered Dietitian Karlene Karst.
Hi, my name is Karlene Karst, and I'm a registered dietitian and author and the formulator of the Sealicious line of omega oils. Well, I'm so excited to be here with National Nutrition tonight to give a lecture and provide education on the importance of healthy fat and educate people on how good fats work to deal with inflammation in the body. Tonight we're going to talk a lot of it, about inflammation and what some of the triggers are and some of the triggers in your diet, some of the things you might be doing that are triggering the inflammatory response, and look at how the importance of the omega-3s, the omega-7s, something that's new. How many of you have heard of omega-7s before? A few of you, okay. So these are new. And that's a cool thing. There's new research coming out all the time. So we're gonna talk about that. Sound good? All right. So I unfortunately can't turn the slides myself. So I'm gonna have my good friend Theo advance the slides for me. Go ahead. So basically, when I talked about autoimmune conditions and I speak about some of these other conditions, a lot of chronic diseases that people are experiencing today, everything from cardiovascular disease to Alzheimer's, depression, certain digestive conditions, psoriasis, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. A lot of these conditions have something at their core, and that's inflammation. Wouldn't you agree? Yes. And inflammation is rampant, it's dangerous, it's destructive, yet the fascinating thing is if you look at data from even 20 years ago, or you ask your friends, or you think back to when you were a child, did you hear people talking about fibromyalgia and mixed connective tissue disease and lupus and psoriasis and all these inflammatory conditions that we talk about now? Do you remember that from years gone by? No. So what has changed? What is the trigger? What's going on? And I think we can all agree that it's our diet. It's our food. It's what we put into our body every single day. It influences how you feel. Truly 100%. And if you haven't experienced, change something in your diet and you'll see what I mean. It's truly remarkable. So all this inflammation is being triggered by the kinds of foods that we're eating. And the kind of food that's available to us, to very busy people in our world who are reaching for packaged and processed and convenience foods that have made our life so much easier and so much more simple. We live in such a privileged country that we have access to all of these things, yet at the same time, it's making us so much sicker. And it's creating a system of inflammation that's extremely difficult to beat. It can be done, but it definitely requires some significant changes. And so there's definitely a few things going on. So we know that inflammation can be in 2 forms. So it can be acute. So if I stub my toe right now, my toe would probably turn red and it would swell up because of acute inflammation in the body. And I would probably hobble around, ow, 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 as the body's trying to clear out those acute phase inflammatory hormones that get released. And then tomorrow I'd be fine and I wouldn't even probably know that I had done that tonight. Chronic inflammation is different. It's persistent, it doesn't go away, and it persists, and it sometimes travels and moves throughout the body. And that's the kind of inflammation that we want to be concerned about. And we know that this is when the body essentially starts to turn on itself. So we can look at this in the form of autoimmune conditions like I was talking about that can be triggered after stressful events. Do you want to know that women, more so than men, suffer from autoimmune conditions. In fact, it's about 80% of women and 20% of men are the ones who are suffering from autoimmune conditions, so significantly related to females, and I think there's a strong estrogen connection there. And most autoimmune conditions have a significant component of them is the inflammatory response. And like I said, they can be triggered by food, they can be triggered by environmental chemicals, things called, what's the word for environmental estrogen? Does anyone know? Xenoestrogen. Here we go. Awesome. Something called xenoestrogen, okay? And we know that xenoestrogens are persistent in our diet. They come from, well, more so before than now, plastics, okay? We knew that there was a big movement to removing something called BPA out of plastic containers. Those are xenoestrogens, pesticides and chemicals in our environment, phthalates and other ingredients that are found in, the name all of a sudden just escaped me, other ingredients that are found in skincares and moisturizers and all the things we put on our body contain these hormone disruptors, these xenoestrogens that can also trigger autoimmune conditions, okay? What they also do is are being associated with all these different chronic conditions that we deal with here. So there's definitely a loop and a connection between all of these different things. Advancer, please. Sorry, Theo. No worries. So we know that there's a connection too with free radicals. So free radicals are extremely dangerous in the body. Now free radicals are toxic and they are, in my opinion, caused by, again, coming back to a lot of the foods. And we're going to look at the foods that specifically are related to this. And one of the big triggers in our diet are toxic refined oils, okay? So people who are using a lot of corn, maybe soybeans, safflower, sunflower oils at high heat, cooking them daily in their food, and this triggers free radicals in the body. And when these free radicals are left unchecked, they contribute to cell growth, damage, and the inflammatory response. Next slide. So what we're trying to do is balance these things out. So overall, what we're trying to do is find that balance. And remember when I talked about there's not just one thing we're going to be doing that is going to help us achieve our health, but really it's going to be a combination of trying to control the free radicals in the body, which are going to be a trigger towards the inflammation and vice versa, helping to control those by incorporating more antioxidants. I heard Darren talking earlier about vitamin C. We're going to talk a little bit more about some other antioxidants that we can incorporate along with natural anti-inflammatories, of course the omegas being a contributing part of it. And that's how we achieve good health. It's trying to find a balance. So that's why there's not just one thing that you can do. It's going to be a combination of things. And what works for me might be different than what works for you, because all of our bodies are different and they respond differently to so many of these different nutrients. And so what I might be deficient in, you might not necessarily be. So what are some of the triggers for inflammation in the diet? There are more than this, of course, but I kind of picked the top ones that I know people are using at home. So of course we talked a little bit about toxic refined oils. Now this is one of the things and one of the changes. Of course the topic tonight is really about good fats. So if I was to suggest you doing anything tonight, that would be to do an oil makeover in your pantry. So when you get home tonight, take a look at the kind of oils that you're using. How many people are using olive oil for pretty much everything? Okay, so you're going to change. You're going to stop doing that. So olive oil is a good oil. Extra virgin olive oil is good for you. They're full of monounsaturated fats, which are omega what? Are they 3s, 6s, 7s, 5s, or 9s? Olive oil. 3s. No, not omega-3. Yes, in the back. 6 and 9? 6 and 9, that's right. So olive oil, primarily the omega-9s. So omega-9s are good fats. They're not essential because actually our body can manufacture them from other fats, but they are healthy for you, okay? So olive oil is a beautiful fat. I married into an Italian family right from Italy, and they literally get olive oil shipped in drums over to Vancouver. And the whole family gets their wine bottles of olive oil, and it's green, and it smells amazing, and it tastes incredible. It's a beautiful, delicate oil, and it's honestly not intended to fry with. So I know a lot of people who use olive oil for pretty much everything, from making salad dressings, which is wonderful, and that's one of the great things that we can do with olive oil, dipping the bread into, and then also people are frying with it. And it's that high heat on these delicate oils that actually denatures the fatty acids. and create something called toxic free radicals in the body. And those toxic free radicals increase the inflammatory response. They cause us to gain belly fat. They cause pain. They cause the inflammation. They cause dry skin. They cause brain fog and a lot of other things. Something simple as that can have that significant of an impact because it's changing what nature intended for us to do with that. And I think anytime we alter or change, this is when we're going to start to see effects of this in our health and in our body. So olive oil is wonderful. Remember, low to medium heat, okay? So some of these other oils that I have listed up there, if you recognize some of these that you're using at home, this might be one of the places you want to start. So I highly recommend, you're probably going to have at least 3 or 4 different oils that you use in your home for various applications. So you're going to have something that you make dips and dressings and marinades maybe, and use for low heat and pouring on your vegetables after they've been steamed. So olive oil is a great example for that. There's also something that's fairly new to the market called camelina oil, which is actually being grown on my family farm now. My brother, who's extremely progressive and extremely innovative and has done an incredible job of changing some of the farming practices on my family farm in Saskatchewan, he's now growing this new form of omega-3 called camelina oil. So I encourage you to check that out because it's pretty awesome in terms of what it can do for health, and you can actually heat it. So there's oils that you're going to be using. I love coconut oil. Actually, I love coconut everything. Who likes coconut? I mean, really? Coconut oil, coconut milk, coconut sugar, coconut flour, coconut for body care, coconut for my hair, coconut for almost everything. So I highly recommend coconut oil, about 375 degrees. It's great to make pancakes on a Saturday morning with your children. And it's actually a wonderful fat that you can actually use up to high heat. You're going to know when you've heated your oil too high because it's going to start doing what? It's going to start smoking, and literally smoke will be pouring off your stove. And that's when you know you've heated your oil too high, okay? Another high heat oil I like grapeseed oil. So that's another one that's more neutral in its flavor and can be heated to high temperatures. So those are some of the oils. And then you're going to have your oils that are supplemental. Okay, so your omega-3 fish oils, maybe you're using a vegetarian form of omega-3, and these are the oils you're not going to heat or use in your cooking. So you might find that you end up with a few different oils. How many people use and like butter? Amen. Butter's good. You can use butter. This was one of the things, literally, when I was, Basel is a big sponsor of, I know, right? Is a big sponsor of nutrition colleges. And I thought Basel was the best. And I went home on the weekends to Saskatchewan. Mom, you're just making us all so unhealthy. You're drinking whole milk and you're eating butter, and shame on you. Switch to Basel. So after 5 years, when I went to university, finally I got her to buy margarine. And then I graduated from university and I'm like, actually, you were right. You should continue to use the butter. It is so much better for you. So when you're using butter in your cooking, especially if you're heating it, what's burning is actually the milk solids. So there's something that you can do. You can either just use it like that and not heat it quite so high so it doesn't start to burn. Or there's something called clarified butter that you can also get that has actually the milk solids removed, and it's wonderful to use on high temperatures. So those are just some suggestions on some of the oils that you can be using, and you should be making a change here because, like I said, this is one of the biggest contributing factors to these toxic free radicals that are lurking around our body and stimulating the inflammatory hormones to start, okay? Red meat. Now, I am not saying to not eat red meat because it wouldn't work for me to be a vegetarian. I need to have meat in my diet. I don't feel well if I don't. It's maybe just my blood type. It's maybe just the way that I am. But I highly encourage you, if you can, to buy grass-fed, free-range organic beef when possible, because we know that significant amount of red meat, or any animal-based product actually, that comes from an animal who was fed a very high grain or corn-based diet, what happens is they eat corn or they eat this grain, and it increases the amount of the omega-6 fatty acids in their bodies. So something called arachidonic acid, which sounds frightening because it kind of is in terms of what it can do to your body. So this pro-inflammatory omega-6 arachidonic acid does just that. So when we eat the eggs and we eat the meat, that has a lot of arachidonic acid, it increases the inflammatory response in the body as well, also creating free radical damage. So when possible, if you can, buy the free-range eggs, buy the grass-fed meat, you're really doing yourself a big favor, okay? We're gonna also try to change the refined grains in our diet, everything white. White bread, white rice, white pasta, white sugar, white. We've got a lot of white things going on in most people's pantries, and this is a good place to make some changes, especially if you're dealing with inflammation. If you're dealing with inflammatory conditions, chances are you're going to be sensitive to gluten, so that might be something that you want to take a look at, because this is going to be a trigger for you. And if you're trying to get better, remember, it's not just one change that's going to make a difference, but you're going to start somewhere, and you're going to start small and make one change at a time. And this might be one of the areas that you're thinking of could be your trigger, okay? Trans fats, hydrogenated oils, high fructose corn syrup, which was probably one of the worst things that was ever invented from a food manufacturer standpoint. A drink for them, absolutely toxic and dangerous for our health. So be very cautious and conscious of the high fructose corn syrup in any food products you might be using. Dairy, some of you might be, dairy might be a trigger for you. It's not for everybody, but it is for many people. So I recommend, I'm married to a naturopath, and so one of the things that he does with most of his patients when they come in with inflammatory conditions is he does a lot of elimination from the diet, and then after about a month, start to slowly reintroduce certain foods like gluten, like dairy, and see if the trigger happens. And if it does, then you know that that's what it was that was creating some of the symptoms. It could be dry skin, psoriasis, joint pain, brain fog. You can't even imagine the connection between gluten and foggy brain or not being able to think clearly during the day. There's a very strong connection there. So this might be one of your triggers. And like I said, everybody's trigger is going to be different. A lot of alternatives for dairy, okay? Again, coconut milk is so delicious. The nut milks are fantastic. There's rice milk. There's a lot of different hemp milk. There's a lot of different options that you can use, okay? Aspartame, artificial sweeteners, no, don't use them. Stop today. If you're a diet pop drinker, please stop. It's just not good for you. It's extremely toxic. Okay, look for stevia liquid drops, add them to sparkling water. Stevia, if you've got to have that carbonation, there's other things that you can do. So stress, is that your trigger? Okay, lack of sleep, is that your trigger? I know for myself, if I've been working too hard and I go at a pretty good, pace, I can tell when my autoimmune condition flares up, and then I know it's time to take a step back and take care of myself, because I always say, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else. So it's okay. Give yourself permission to invest in the time to take care of yourself and to recognize what some of these triggers might be for you and your health. Next. So those are some of the inflammatory foods. So some of the things you're going to do. So those are the things you're going to remove from your diet when you're dealing with inflammation. And actually, it's good practice for all of us, because it's easier to prevent health conditions than it is to try to regain your health later. So we want to try to protect and preserve. Remember, we're given one body, one chance, one life. And we have to do everything we can to keep ourselves as healthy as possible. The good news is that your body will rebuild. You can make changes. I saw this in my own health. I've witnessed it. I've seen when I've not been taking good care of myself, and when I get back on track and I start to incorporate some of these things, I start to tweak and improve my diet again, your body continually rebuilds. And so you can do it. And we're going to talk about the importance of fats for doing that, because they are actually one of the most important things that we can do. So eating omega-3s. How many of you consume fish on a regular basis? Okay, actually, excellent. This is great. This is good news, okay? And we know that obviously accessibility and availability is one of the barriers often for consuming fish. When you can eat wild, please do. Canned fish is totally fine. So if you don't have access, but you have access to a good quality canned tuna or canned salmon, it's excellent. There's lots of omega-3s in there. I love the Raincoast Trading brand of canned fish. So I highly recommend it, and it's perfectly fine for you to do. Great sources of protein, great sources of omega. So you're going to want to try to eat fish twice per week, okay? And even though when you're incorporating these omegas, we're going to talk about how they lower inflammation, it's still not enough. You still need to look at incorporating an omega-3 supplement into your diet. Hemp and chia seeds are amazing. I'm telling you, those things you can put into everything you eat. Whether it's oatmeal, whether it's your Vitamix smoothie. My kids eat more hemp hearts than you can even imagine. I put them in almost everything. I make like a homemade chicken finger, and I'll take hemp hearts and dip the chicken into egg, roll them in the hemp hearts with grated Parmesan cheese, bake them. I think they're fantastic. And it's all full of hemp hearts. There's so many things you can do with them. You can bake with them. Start getting in the habit of incorporating them into all the foods that you eat, and they're going to provide you extra fiber. We're a fiber-deficient society. Most people eat on average about 10 grams of fiber a day, if that. And we need how much? 35! You guys are good. There's some good education around here. We need about 35 grams of fiber a day. So most people are eating around 10. So we're a fiber-deficient society, and all these seeds and nuts are also great at contributing fiber to the diet, okay? So hemp and chia seeds, very anti-inflammatory, providing these good, healthy omega-3s, also very alkalizing for the body, great source of energy, highly recommended. Cruciferous vegetables, okay? I particularly point out cruciferous vegetables because when we're talking about inflammation, we're also talking about something, the free radical cell damage, and cruciferous vegetables have a particular group of nutrients called indoles, okay? So these indole compounds actually help the body to kind of deactivate and they absorb, they kind of quench, like Pac-Man, all these free radicals. So the more cruciferous vegetables, like broccoli, you can incorporate into your diet, the better. Especially if you're dealing with autoimmune conditions, certain types of hormone-dependent breast cancers, cardiovascular disease risk factors. We know that we've got lots of this free radical damage in the body, and anything that we can do to help clear out some of those environmental estrogens and help deactivate some of those free radicals, we're going to actually start to feel a lot better. So lightly cooked, not overcooked, okay, or raw, but of course we can only tolerate so much raw broccoli in the day. The research shows up to about 4 pounds of broccoli a day. I don't think any of you are going to eat 4 pounds of raw broccoli on a daily basis, but there are actually, if you're interested in getting more cruciferous vegetables from your diet, there's some cruciferous broccoli extracts on the market that are available too that are very therapeutic, especially if you're a female dealing with environmental estrogens and hormone issues, PMS concerns, etc. Blueberries, amazing. Add blueberries again, like your chia and your hemp seeds too. Everything, your smoothies, your cereal, your oatmeal. They're great for your brain. They're wonderful. Been researched for protecting against Alzheimer's disease and dementia. I highly encourage blueberries to be one of your daily superfoods, okay? Turmeric extract. How many of you have heard of turmeric? Been used in cultures around the world. Incredible, again, for free radical cell damage, decreasing the inflammatory response in the body. There's an amazing ingredient, an amazing product called Curamed and Curamed. It's actually the #1 natural pain reliever on the market. And it's a special form of turmeric extract that actually stays absorbed in the blood. It can pass the blood-brain barrier. It can be absorbed into the blood cells and stay there for up to about 8 hours. And it's incredible. I'll probably use this product for the rest of my life. It's amazing. So turmeric extract, but not all turmeric is absorbed. In fact, most of it is very poorly absorbed. So great thing to incorporate into your diet, but you also want to make sure you're taking an absorbable form. Okay, the ancient grains. Holy, quinoa, crazy, right? Everything's about quinoa, so all these ancient grains are really making a comeback. Start learning how to incorporate some of these into your food, into your breakfast. What we should be eating, 5 small meals a day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and 2 snacks in between. Keep your blood sugar levels stabilized, keeps your metabolism up and running. Every time you eat, you're going to have a combination of proteins, healthy fat, and fiber. So when you sit down to eat a snack or a dinner, take a look at your plate because those are the 3 nutrients that you should be incorporating into each meal and snack, okay? Doesn't matter if it's breakfast, do you have good fat at breakfast? If you don't, add your fish oil to your blender. If you don't, add hemp hearts to your steel-cut oatmeal, okay? Have your snacks, have your lunch, have your dinner, but always focus on the protein, the good fat, and the fiber. And this is one of the best ways to control belly fat, to improve insulin response, to keep keep your energy levels up throughout the day, and to basically, this is honestly a simple, but this is the best way that you can eat. There's so many diet fads and diet crazes out there that give all these ratios of this and that, and eat at this time, and don't combine these foods and combine these foods. It's actually quite simple to feel well with food, and it's honestly, it's about eating regularly throughout the day and making sure you've got a combination of all those different nutrients at each meal and snack. Okay, so again, coming back to the fact that the most important thing, one of the most important nutrients that we can incorporate are these healthy fats, and they work in the body in many different ways. Now, when it comes to something called foundational nutrients, okay, so this is on top of the protein, the good fat, and the fiber you're going to eat every time you sit down for a meal or snack. There are 3 different nutrient groups that I think every single person, I give them to my kids after, well, pretty much from 8 months, maybe even earlier. And there are 3 supplements that I think every single person should take. And these are 3 nutrients that we don't get enough of in our food. They are required for good health. And without these basic foundational nutrients, it's going to be very difficult to get your health to the next level. Number 1, omega-3s, okay? EPA and DHA, the combination of both, a minimum of 1,000 milligrams of EPA and DHA per day. We're going to talk about this, but they build all the cells in the body. They're like the glue that holds you together, okay? Not to mention they decrease inflammatory hormones called prostaglandins. So that's number 1. Number 2, probiotics. What are probiotics? Good bacteria, okay? Pro, life, good for you, living organisms inside your gastrointestinal tract that have basically been killed off by stress and toxins and poor diet and sugar and overuse of antibiotics over the last number of years. And our balance of bacteria inside of our gut should be about 80% good and 20% bad bacteria, about an 80-20 ratio. Instead, it's pretty much reversed. It's about 20% good and 80% bad bacteria. And that unhealthy bacteria living inside of our gut is a massive trigger for inflammation, for all kinds of different conditions that we're experiencing. And sometimes it's as simple as fixing the gut can fix all kinds of issues. My husband, being a naturopath, sees tons of children in his in his practice, and he has a lot of moms that bring kids that have dermatitis or eczema or psoriasis, and he'll take them off sugar and he'll give them probiotics, and the mom always says the same thing. No, but I need a cream because they're red, their skin is red and it's itchy, and they need a cream to put on. He's like, trust me, we're going to fix the gut, and if it doesn't relieve it, then we'll look at something to use topically. They're like, no, but it's red and it's itchy. I need a cream. He's like, trust me, it's about fixing and replenishing the gastrointestinal tract. And you know what? Children respond so well and so quickly to natural health products because their enzyme systems are very reactive. Usually within a week, they come back and the dermatitis is almost always cleared up. So it's incredible the connection the gut, the gastrointestinal tract has to everything on the outside and to basically how our body is feeling overall. We have this incredible dysbiosis in our gut, and so we need to replenish that. And you do that by incorporating good bacteria. So we need to supplement with probiotics. You can eat fermented foods and you can eat yogurt, but it's still not going to be enough because most of the bacteria there are not able to get past the stomach acid. So we need to deliver those bacteria right to the gastrointestinal tract. Okay, so that's why you need to use probiotics either in an enteric-coated capsule form or in the form of a pearl or something that can bypass all that stomach acid. Also really important in the winter months, colds and flus have been excessive this year. The viruses are stronger than ever, and 80% of your immune system is actually in your gut. So you want to make sure that we strengthen the gastrointestinal tract because that's where a lot of these immune receptor sites are actually found. So there's a very strong correlation between an unhealthy gut and how affected we are by colds and flus and how often we get sick and our health overall. So that's number 2 is probiotics, and number 3 would be vitamin D. Okay? Vitamin D is super important. There's an amazing book I highly recommend everybody to read. The Vitamin D Cure is called. It was written by a medical doctor. Enlightening. I mean, the research on vitamin D is just profound. It's just profound. And we know a lot more now even about dosing of vitamin D, and the doctor in the book recommends 20 to 25 IUs, international units, of vitamin D per pound of body weight. So chances are none of you are taking enough. because I certainly wasn't. When I read this book, I'm like, wow, that's a lot. But you know, when you think about it, when you're exposed to sunlight, within 15 minutes of sun exposure on skin that hasn't been covered up with SPF, do you want to know your body manufactures 25,000 IUs of vitamin D within 15 minutes? It's remarkable. So if we think about it, we get like no sun here, and when we do get sun, we're so worried about getting skin cancer that we like cover ourselves up with SPF to protect against the harmful rays. So when you cover with SPF, your body's not able to manufacture enough of the vitamin D3. So most of us are very deficient in vitamin D, and the research in the importance of vitamin D is absolutely critical and essential. So start incorporating more vitamin D. Actually, vitamin D testing is readily available now. You can actually find out your levels of vitamin D by asking for a blood test, and you can actually figure that out, and then you'll know if you're deficient, and you'll be able to adjust your vitamin D supplementation. Sound good? So those are the 3 most important supplements and nutrients that we can take, and there's a reason, because you need to have a healthy foundation built. It's like building a house and moving the furniture in when the roof isn't even finished. So if we get a snowstorm, or like in Vancouver and it rains, all the furniture is going to be ruined, and nothing is going to work very well in the house if there's no roof. It's the same thing in our body. We have to build the foundation before we can really start to fix everything. So you build your foundation, you build a healthy gut, you build your cells with good fats, you have your vitamin D, everything starts working better. Then all those other amazing nutrients that are out there are going to actually work. Because if I had a dime for every time I had somebody tell me, I tried that supplement and it didn't work for me, I'd be a very rich person. And I'm like, trust me, it does work. It's just possibly your body and your cell membrane structure isn't yet set up to be able to absorb those nutrients. So there's just some back work that needs to be done in order to really receive the efficacy and kind of get what we need from our supplements and from our food. And it really is about creating a cell membrane structure. So that's what these good fats do. So remember, our body is built, next slide. Our body is built out of billions and billions of cells. Cells are built out of membranes, and membranes are built out of fats. So when you have a diet that's either rich in not very good fats because you've eaten a processed food, very high processed food diet, or a lot of hydrogenated oils or convenience foods, that's essentially what your cell membrane structure becomes built from. And it becomes very rigid and very hard, and basically what happens is, based on the permeability of the cell, it doesn't allow nutrients to be absorbed into the cell because it's too rigid and hard. We also have things called receptor sites that exist around the outside of the cell. And we have receptor sites for most hormones: insulin, estrogen, testosterone. And those receptor sites, when the cell membrane is very rigid and very hard, they can't react. There's no affinity for any of the hormones that are coming at them. So for example, when you change the cell membrane structure and you make it very fluid and flexible with omega-3s, all of a sudden your insulin response will improve. Because now the insulin receptor site, instead of being very rigid and hard, bounces around and can react to the insulin being sent to it from the pancreas. Now all of a sudden your blood sugar will go down because the cell is able to uptake sugar into it. So everything starts working better when you change the fluidity of the cell membrane. So you have to incorporate these good omegas in order to do that. Remember, good fats make the cell very fluid, very flexible. It's not what you take, it's what you absorb that's most important. So remember, you can take all the nutrients you want, but if your cell can't absorb them, you're not going to experience the benefit from them. So number 1 reason to take omega-3s is to change the fluidity of the cell membrane and allow the body to be able to absorb nutrients. The other thing that they do is they decrease a class of hormones called prostaglandins. Now, prostaglandin is just a fancy word for pro-inflammatory hormones, and they increase in the body, especially in relation to cardiovascular disease, depression. We're seeing so much incredible research in the area of brain health. So this is really kind of one of the new areas that we're just seeing even more evidence for with omega-3s. And the research is showing us that our brains are literally on fire because of the amount of inflammatory foods that we're consuming. Okay, so if our bodies and our joints and our tissues around our body can be pro-inflammatory, so can the cells and the tissues of the brain. Did you know your brains are over 60% fat? Over 60% fat is what your brain is essentially made of. So I had, actually, yeah, that's right. I heard somebody say the term fathead, and I was wondering if anyone was going to say that. I was caught off guard one time. I was doing a radio show, and the guy's like, so is that what they're called, fatheads? I'm like, oh, maybe. Maybe, that's a good point. 60% fat. So those tissues and the cells in the brain will take up any fat, because that's what they need to be made of. So whether you've had trans fats, or good fats, or bad fats, it'll take up whatever fat is there. So if it's obviously taking up the unhealthy fat in the diet, that's essentially what the brain is going to become made of. And long-term, over time, this is going to create some serious issues. And when we look at the rates of anxiety disorders and depression, the rates of ADD and ADHD that we're seeing in our children, it's no wonder when we look at the kind of diet that we're eating and the lack of good fats, why we're seeing some of the responses that we're seeing. Next slide, please. Next slide. Sorry, sometimes Okay, so there are two omega-3s that are important that you'll see when you're using a fish oil product or you're supplementing with fish oil, and those omega-3s are called EPA and DHA, okay? So those are the two distinct omega-3s. Now there's probably 20 or so omega-3s, so there's a number of different omega-3s, but the two that we know most about and the two that we want to focus on are EPA and DHA, okay? So DHA has a very structural, functional role in the body. So think about DHA is building cells, okay? So that's what DHA is. So it's very important for the central nervous system, okay? It helps build the central nervous system. That's why it's extremely important to use DHA in prenatal care. So when a woman is pregnant, in the 3rd trimester, 80% of the baby's energy is going towards developing its brain. So we want to make sure that there's sufficient DHA there to build the cells of the brain and build the central nervous system. Did you know the retina of the eye has the largest concentration of DHA over any other part of the body? So extremely important for visual acuity, okay? So that's one of the things DHA is good for. DHA is incredible for depression, okay? For Alzheimer's prevention, for preventing dementia, for children with ADD and ADHD. These are some of the structural and functional roles we're seeing with DHA, and the research is just profound in this area. EPA, on the other hand, they have very long names, like eicosapentaenoic acid. You're not going to say that. Or maybe I should get everybody up after I try practicing that. It took me a long time to be able to say those words. So EPA for short. But EPA is the anti-inflammatory fat. Okay? So when you think about joint pain, when you think about other kinds of inflammatory conditions like cardiovascular disease, anything in the body that has an inflammatory response, EPA is going to be the one that helps to lower the inflammation in the body because it helps to decrease those inflammatory hormones that are kind of running crazy because of all those free radicals that are lurking in the body from the food that we're eating. Okay? So those are the difference between the EPA and DHA. So ideally we want to have a combination of those. Okay? So that's why, by nature, fish oil naturally contains both EPA and DHA. So it's looking for a ratio of those. So omega-3s are really important for life, throughout life. And these are something we want to start, like I said, when a woman is pregnant with her baby. You want to give them to children. I can't tell you how scary it is to actually read some of the studies that have been done on the significance of a deficiency of omega-3s in our kids. And of course, they're finding that children who are deficient in omega-3s have poor vision, they have poor performance in school, they are not able to concentrate and focus as well, they're showing lower IQ scores, poor reading skills. I mean, it's quite frightening, actually. And there was a new study that came out in September, and it looked at about 500 kids, and 493 of the 500 children were deficient in omega-3s. And so deficient that, you gotta hear this, it's like mind-blowing. So basically their omega-3 blood levels were at about 0.5%. The ideal range is between 8 and 12%. And they were at a 0.5% blood level of omega-3. They're so deficient because guess what? If they're not eating a food, or if they were deficient from the time they were born, they're going to continue to be deficient throughout their life. And the interesting conclusion to that is, the researcher said, it's not even just now during their school age years where they need this DHA and they need these omega-3s to be able to learn and focus and pay attention and learn how to read. It's later on, and the future prediction of our healthcare lies in some of these nutritional deficiencies that we're seeing in our children. Because if they're deficient as children, what is going to happen later on, where we know that omega-3 status is highly correlated with cardiovascular disease and diabetes and some of these conditions, some of these disease conditions that we know are basically at the top of the number one killers in our country. So there's some very significant outcomes that are coming because our children are so deficient in some of these essential nutrients. So I can't stress enough how important it is for mothers, for their children, to start incorporating these good fats into their children's diet. Up until about age 5, a child's gray matter in their brain is continually developing. So we want to really saturate them with omega-3s up until that point. Of course, continue on after, but that is really a crucial time. And the omega-3 needs are higher than almost any other time in their life. Okay, so we know brain development and function. This is, like I said, an incredibly important area. Just the studies that we're seeing with developing the brain tissue, preventing depression and Alzheimer's disease. Again, important to have about 3,000 milligrams of omega-3s on a daily basis. Okay, so that's the number you kind of want to look for. So you have to sometimes do a little bit of investigating to make sure you're using enough of the omega-3s. So 3,000 milligrams when it comes to mental health and depression is what you want to be looking for. There's also some great studies that have been done on individuals that have stroke, have suffered from stroke, and when they are given high-dose omega-3s, around 4 grams of DHA, how much quicker they're able to recover from the damage that's been done from the stroke. So these are incredibly high-performing nutrients, and they work extremely well. So never too late to start incorporating the omega-3s. Again, cardiovascular health is probably the area where the omega-3s have shined over the last 15 years. Actually, in the year 2000 is when the first qualified health claim came out on omega-3s. And back then, they said everybody should eat fish at least twice a week. So everybody started eating fish, and they started frying it and deep frying it. And it was like, okay, not exactly the way we want people to use their omega-3s. A for effort, but okay. Now we need to recommend actually people supplement and incorporate omega-3 fish oil supplements into their diet because of the incredible connection. You can lower triglyceride levels even better with omega-3s than you can with pharmaceuticals. Okay? Did you want to know there's a pharmaceutical drug, you probably heard about it in the United States. I think it's, oh no, the name's going to escape me. Is it Omacor? I think it's called Omacor. It's a prescription omega-3. And it did $1.4 billion in sales last year. It's a prescription. And I think they charge about $400 a script. You want to know you can buy fish oil for $20 a bottle in the health food store? You don't need a $400 prescription for it. It's incredible. Okay, so these are cardiologists that are prescribing these extremely expensive fish oil prescriptions. So everybody kind of wants in on this omega-3 market. You can lower triglyceride levels by about 40% using omega-3 fish oils, and you need about the 3,000 milligrams per day. 3,000 to 4,000 milligrams per day of omega-3s is the recommendation that we're looking for there. Okay, and remember we talked about brain and eye health, the importance of strengthening visual acuity with DHA. Next slide, Theo. Okay, this I talked about, so next, I think now we're going to just skip through a couple of these slides just for time. Oh, I want to just show you this because these are my kids. This is my brag board. These are my boys, and yes, they are that high energy. Jump that high, and we can get them. They're just awesome. Luca and Mateo. So this is my Omega-3 Kids product, and cotton candy is the flavor. And no sugar in it, but cotton candy flavor, and those are my boys. And so they are extremely influential when it comes to Sealicious. Okay, we're going to skip through this for sake of time. So I'll let you skip. Okay, so the omega-3 recommendations. So using natural triglyceride fish oils is one of the things that I recommend. The reason I like the natural triglyceride fish oils is because they tend to be the most stable and the best absorbed in the body. So that's one of the things that you can look for. Again, the recommendation, the reason I keep saying this over is because it's a numbers game when it comes to using natural health products. And we've come so far in our knowledge in the last 15 years, and we're way more sophisticated now. Before, when I first started in this industry, if you were using like one fish oil soft gel a day, that was great. Now we know that, there's specific recommendations that we need to use so that we're taking enough, so that you can actually get a proper response. And they absolutely work. We just want to make sure we're taking enough. So 1,000 milligrams of EPA and DHA would be at a minimum, okay? Anywhere up to the 3,000 milligrams of EPA and DHA. And this is one of the things, next slide. This is one of the things actually, so when formulating the Sealicious and doing omega-3s, one of the things that I wanted to do was make sure it tasted delicious and smelled delicious. And part of this came from being around fish oils for the last 15 years and listening to a lot of people saying, I don't know if I can do fish oils, I'm terrified of the smell, I'm terrified of the taste. I remember when I was a kid and my mom used to line us up and make us take cod liver oil. I know, see, it doesn't matter where I go, I get the same response. People are so traumatized from that rancid cod liver oil. Your mom was doing the right thing. She just was giving you something that was rancid, and it wasn't going to taste her. So fish oils have come a long way, since then. So I think that anytime we can make something taste delicious and smell delicious, I think the compliance is going to be there. And the other thing in my husband's practice, he said that compliance with the fish oils is so important because it's one of the foundational nutrients that he recommends for his patients. Getting them to use it and want to use it on a daily basis is really important. So this was part of the inspiration for the name Sealicious, obviously, and having something that tasted great and smelled great. So if you haven't had a chance to try it, we'll let everybody do that afterwards. So next slide. Next slide. Maybe. Quality of fish oil is important. So I just want to touch on quality because the fish oil business can be a fishy business. So when you're looking at incorporating nutrients, you want to make sure that they're high quality. And so there's a really neat organization out of Guelph, Ontario, called IFOS. And so that's what it is there. So when you're using your oils, look for that IFOS logo because they are one of the world's leading quality organizations when it comes to fish oils. So they work with groups that set all the standards to make sure that there's no mercury and heavy metals and PCBs, and that the oil is stable, that it hasn't started to oxidize and turn rancid. So they're really about protecting the consumer and making sure that you're using the highest quality oil. 98% of the time, when people say, oh, I get that burp back and that fishy aftertaste, it's because the oil has started to oxidize. So we don't want to use rancid fish oil. We want to use something that's very stable and something very stable and very pure. And this organization is just incredible at ensuring that we're delivering high quality fish oil. Next slide. Okay, a couple things. There's a new omega. I talked a little bit about this in the beginning, something called Omega-7. So what Omega-7 is the new omega on the block. And again, this is where we're seeing some new research. So there's a marker of inflammation in the body, something called C-reactive protein. How many of you have heard of that before? Okay, so C-reactive protein is something called an acute phase protein. So it'll increase in inflammatory conditions, and it's non-specific. So depending on what kind of inflammation, if you have arthritis, cancer, irritable bowel syndrome, cardiovascular disease, depression, your C-reactive protein levels can go up, okay? Because it's non-specific. But when you combine them with elevated cholesterol and elevated triglyceride levels, this is a much more important indicator of your risk of having a heart attack and developing heart disease. So cardiologists and doctors are using C-reactive protein now is a more important indicator of people's risk of developing heart disease. So what they've done is this research on omega-7, and actually the lead researcher, you might recognize the name, is Dr. Roizen. Does it ring a bell to anybody? Yeah. You're Dr. Oz followers here? Yeah. That's good. He's done great things for our industry. He's really helped to spread the word about good nutrition and all these unique things that, think about it, 10 years ago we wouldn't know anything about, right? So Dr. Roizen is Dr. Oz's partner, and he's the lead researcher on omega-7. And so they looked at a group of patients, 60 people in total, and they gave them omega-7. These people had elevated C-reactive protein, and it reduced their C-reactive protein by 50%. There's nothing else in natural health that will lower C-reactive protein like that. Statin drugs, everybody familiar with what a statin is? Okay, just kidding. Statin drugs will reduce C-reactive protein by about 25%, not to mention all the side effects that come with it. So the omega-7, the purified omega-7, reduces C-reactive protein by 50%. It's truly incredible, and it's really a breakthrough in our thinking in our knowledge about what we can do to help patients that have risk factors for heart disease. The other thing they studied with purified omega-7 is helping to decrease fatty liver. That was the other thing they found was beneficial with purified omega-7. And the third thing they found was helping people that have insulin resistance issues. So people who need to improve their cell's ability to utilize insulin. Remember, your cell membrane has these insulin receptors that live on the outside of it. So we want to improve their affinity. We want to make them bounce around a little bit more to improve the sensitivity towards the insulin. So this is one of the other things that helps glucose uptake into the cell. So for people who are dealing with insulin resistance issues, purified omega-7 has been studied for that. So truly amazing. So 420 milligrams is the clinically studied recommendation and dose that they used in the clinical trial on these patients, and they saw, like I said, that 50% reduction in C-reactive protein. So we're going to hear a lot more about purified omega-7. It was actually on Dr. Oz back in December, but it will be on again at some point this year. And they've written about it in their newly expanded You Doctors book. Okay, and I just want to mention the camelina oil a little bit more, in that this is one of the up-and-coming things to look for when you're looking for new good fats to use in your cooking. And the fact that the camelina can be heated to about 375 degrees, which is very unique for omega-3. So if you think about flax oil, you can't cook with flax oil at all. If it gets near heat, it starts to oxidize and break down. So this is a real breakthrough in terms of functional food and being able to incorporate good foods into good nutrients into our food. And I think this is really one of the trends that we're seeing now is how can we deliver things that people are eating and incorporate more good nutrients into it. So when we see breakthrough crops like camelina, and part of the reason what makes camelina oil so strong is it's loaded with vitamin E. So it's got all these natural tocopherols that are found in the camelina oil, and they do just an amazing job of protecting the oil. So Mother Nature is really hard in terms of what she does, because omega-3s need a lot of protection because they're highly reactive to moisture and temperature and oxygen. So that is one of the exciting things. Okay, so overall, what makes good health? Just to summariise for everybody. So did everybody learn at least one new thing today? Okay, so that's my goal. Is to teach you at least one new thing that you haven't heard before. And I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes I need to hear it over and over and over again. So that's why a lot of these concepts you might know, and sometimes it's good to have a refresher on it. But again, like I said, it's not just one thing that you're going to be doing that is going to help you reach your optimal health. It's going to be a combination of things. And if you've heard a lot of things tonight that excite you and you want to make some changes, don't overwhelm yourself with them. Always start slow, make one change, see how it goes. Rather than trying to get to the finish line very quickly, take your time in doing it. Let your body adjust and let your body respond. You don't need to start taking 10 different things all at once. It might be very small changes that you make that are going to make a significant impact in how you feel. So I'm excited for you, and I'm so excited that you have these forums to come to, and that National Nutrition just does a phenomenal job of promoting. Trust me, I travel all across North America and into Europe and Asia, and I was so impressed by the amazing staff and how knowledgeable. They're super friendly. You walk in there and every single person's happy and smiling, and it was really, really refreshing, and just how innovative and creative they're being at spreading knowledge and spreading education and bringing information to you guys. So you should feel very, very lucky to know National Nutrition and live in such a beautiful place. I'll go ahead and take a few questions.
I noticed that you mentioned hemp seeds quite often, but you didn't mention hemp oils, and I'm interested in knowing about hemp oil. Should you use that and keep it cold? Don't cook with it? Is that correct?
That's a great question. You're right. I didn't mention hemp oil. She asked about hemp oil and whether or not I recommend that, since I talked about the hemp seeds and the hemp hearts more. So basically, yes, hemp oil is excellent if you're looking for a vegetarian alternative to fish oil. Hemp oil is excellent. It contains a balance of omega-3, 6, and 9. Doesn't have the same omega-3s that fish oil
Right.
has, for example, but it's still, they're good fats, and so they're excellent to incorporate into smoothies and your cereals, and take by the spoonful. Don't heat it, because they're the polyunsaturated fats. They have no protection, unlike what camelina oil would with the vitamin E. The hemp oil doesn't have any way to protect it. Flax oil would be the same thing, so you don't want to heat it. So you want to keep it cold and use it cold. Put it in the refrigerator once you open it, and it helps to protect it and keep it fresh.
I just have one more question, and I don't really need the mic.
Sure.
I think everyone.
You have a much better voice tonight.
I do. I have a teacher voice.
Oh, there you go.
You mentioned tuna as one of the fish alternatives twice a week, and I've always, in my reading, that tuna is something to be discouraged because the amount of mercury concerns with tuna.
Right. So she asked about tuna and mercury levels and mercury concerns, and my recommendation of consuming fish twice a week. I use that as an example. I mean, I think that if you're going to be consuming tuna on a daily basis and you already have high levels of heavy metals in your body, that might be something that you want to take a look at. I gave it as an example of canned tuna as a way to get some omega-3s in the diet. Canned salmon would be another great alternative. But you're right, and some of these fish, and that's why, interesting enough, sometimes taking supplements is actually safer in a way, especially on the fish side, because the mercury and the heavy metals have actually been removed from the fish oils. So we do have to be more cognizant of that for sure. Great question. Okay, yeah.
I'm curious about the red palm oil
Yes.
and high heat cooking.
Yes. Yeah, red palm oil and high heat cooking. So that's another new one on the market. And yes, it's great. You can absolutely incorporate that into your diet, and can be used and heated higher, similar to like a coconut oil. And honestly, even if you don't know how high you can heat certain oils, use your senses and just watch what happens when you start heating them, and your stove is going to tell you, because the oil is going to start smoking. You'll see a blue smoke rising off your stove when you heated the oil too high. So let that be your guide and your indicator, and it'll help you to back it off, because honestly, if you turn your burner on 9, what's that temperature actually? How many of us really know, right? So I always just say, take a look at what's going on, and just use that kind of as a guideline to whether or not you've heated your oil too hot.
I used to eat a lot of fish at home. You hear so much about eyeliner fish and a lot of fishes. A lot of it's being packaged and being done in China, and how bad that is for us. So we have got to the point where we aren't eating much fish. So I guess really the supplements really are better.
Yes.
It is a worry when you hear about all the bad thing about fish in China.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's your name? Sorry?
Bonnie.
Bonnie raises a good point about fish consumption and the safety of it and the packaging of it, and some of it being packaged in China, and all the concerns that we have, radiation exposure, all these things that we're hearing about all the time. And I agree that we kind of are losing control of our food supply and what we have available to us. And so obviously availability is a concern. And actually, when they look at studies across Canada, they look at populations that are eating more fish. It's definitely, of course, in the maritime provinces and on the West Coast, where we have wild, fresh fish available to us from March until the end of the year. So I agree with you, and it does raise concerns. And if you're not sure, I would say go with your gut instinct. You know, if something feels off or doesn't feel right, or you think you should be eating something, but it just doesn't, it's not jiving with what you think is right, and so you have some concerns, then don't do it, but still need to get those nutrients into your diet. And that's where supplementing with omega-3s, and it's easy to do, a teaspoon a day will give you what you need in terms of omega-3s. And actually that was part of the change in the recommendations that had come from the FDA and the American Heart Association were for some of these reasons, about safety, about sourcing and supply and sustainability, and then going on and making specific recommendations about incorporating omega-3 supplements into the diet. So thanks, Bonnie. Yeah. And I know it's getting late for everybody, and I really want everybody to drive safe tonight. Hopefully you don't have too far to go, and you're all locals. But thank you all for coming tonight. It was a pleasure meeting you, and God bless. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karlene.
If I can describe National Nutrition with one word, it would be enlightening.
In one word, it would be exceptional.